Good morning, traders. My name is Brad Matheny. Today is November 5th. I'm doing this special update to share with you what I believe is going to be a very interesting and dynamic base bottom setting up over the next 2 or 3 weeks. I spent a lot of time going over my research over the last week or so in preparation for this, and what really caught my attention was this adaptive dynamic learning chart. Over the years, I've come to put a lot of credence into this system, telling me what is likely to come in the near future. Now, you can see in the past, I've drawn some lines showing what is likely to come. Now, understand that we might be off on the peaks and valleys. We might be off on some of the rotations like we were over here. But generally, when you start looking at this, did we move higher up into this level? Yeah, we did. Did we move in this format, moving higher? Yes, we did. It was just a bit more extended. Did we move from this level down into this bottoming formation and see these levels come into play? Yes, we did. This level came into play right here. This level came into play right here. This level came into play right here. So you can see that there is some credence to the validity of what this is presenting. Currently, if I took a look at the last essentially 4 or 5 months of what it's predicting going forward, and what we're seeing is a predominance of, and I would say maybe 80–85% of the outcome is to see the S&P move back into this 435 to 455 range and stall out into the end of the year. This is really going into early 2024. And it's basically saying that we move back up into this upper channel and stall out, which would essentially reflect a very clean A, B, possible C move back down here to the downside. So that would be a very clear Fibonacci price structure. We would basically be at about 75% retracement here off of this move, and then moving potentially downward into what I believe will be the April, May, June collapse in the market. I think next year we're going to see a downward trend just before the tax season hits around end of March, mid-April, starting to see a pretty strong decline, and that is really right over here. I've got to redraw it. Let me redraw this. Drag this over, and we would be looking at an A. Whoop. We would be looking at an A, B, come out into here, March, and then rolling down into April, May, June. And again, I may have been a little high on this. We're really kind of looking at this range here as kind of the peaky area of the market. Now, what's interesting about this, again, ladies and gentlemen, is the adaptive dynamic learning system reads data historically from the chart and tells me what to expect going forward. So we can determine what is likely to come in the near future. I'll show you how this works. Let's just pick a symbol. Let's pick Tesla. I know that we have a number of members that are following Tesla, and I want to just show you what's going on. We're going to pull up a Tesla weekly chart. We're going to pull up, and typically the way this works, ladies and gentlemen, doing the analysis now, taking some time. There we go. Okay, so typically the way this works is I like to look at tops and bottoms. So I like to first start playing around with tops and bottoms. So I'm going to pick right here, and I am going to pick these tops and bottoms. And as you can see, the predictive analysis was fairly clearly lining up. Now, when we don't get a whole lot of data around this analysis, you'll see it line up directly with price action. So let's now take a look back over here and get some price analysis. Here we go. And you can see again we start to see very clear pictures of potential targets as we move these forward and get the lines. As you can see here, Tesla started to show a fairly solid downward trend with a lot of potential upward trends here. As we move forward and start to see indications of where these forward trends play out, remember, each new bar gives us the ability to see something potentially coming in the near future. And as you can see, we're getting a lot of one-off data. We really are getting a lot of one-off data here. Let's go ahead and take a look over here at the most common Tesla outcomes. We'll start back in this area. And what we're looking for is a predominance of outcomes in a certain range. So I go every day going forward. And then what I will do is I will spread this out and I will come in here. It looks a little confusing at first, doesn't it, folks? Well, it's really not all that confusing to me. So when we look at the predominance of data, you can see all of these lines are essentially predictive areas that I'm looking for clusters of lines. So you can see how we have a very solid clustering here. We have solid clustering through this area, and then we start to get a bit more scattered. Okay, so the way I would draw these lines for Tesla is I would say you have a very clear clustering capability up in this area, possibly moving up into this area, and then flattening out back over here. And that would be our upper channel line. Our lower channel line would be something like this, maybe coming back down like this, and coming back out. So this is how I would interpret the Tesla data. I would consider this the lower channel line, and I would consider this the upper channel line, and essentially I would ignore these outlier data because they have not been predictably valid. Now, if I come over here, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to reload all of this, and then I'm going to come to these last three weekly bars. I'm going to click here, here, here. So now this is the most recent data, okay? This is telling me what the last 3 weeks are saying in regards to Tesla, ignoring all of the rest of this. Now, you can clearly see we have this deeper decline, then we have a secondary decline, and we have some sideways consolidation in this area. Then we really start to consolidate over in this area. So we do have, regarding Tesla, we do have a potential outlier down in this area, consolidating back to this area, and then maybe moving downward. We also have a consolidation down here. And again, I'm coming across the clusters here, folks, and then coming down into this area and maybe moving out like this. So if we fail to move in this area, which is the predominant outcome going back many weeks, and we move in this area, then we do have a potential for a downward cycle move in Tesla, maybe down to this 140, 150 area, and that would consolidate right around this area, 225, 230, as a consolidation base into January. Let's take a look at Apple. And again, it takes a little while to load because it's crunching a bunch of data. But what I want to show you is how to use this information as a predictive modeling system and why it is important to understand the SPY predictions are indicating a very strong potential of upward trending, just like we saw in Tesla. And it's also predicting an outlier, probably a 20 to 25% chance that we are going to see, typed the symbol wrong, 20 to 25% chance we're going to see a downward trend. Okay, here's Apple. Let me get rid of this. Still loading, crunching data, crunching. So I'm pulling up 4,500 bars of weekly data. That's what it's using as the analysis for Apple. So here we go. What we're going to do is try to look at the last month or so, which includes all of this, and we will see what it does. So I'm going to come back basically here, start going day by day, or week by week in this case. Seems to be a little slow. Maybe something is loading in the background. There we go. There we go. There we go. So now the reason I like to do tops and bottoms, which is what I'm coming up to here as a top, is that normally we get clusters in the predictive analysis near tops and bottoms that tend to provide a very clear outcome. Okay, so you can see again that this really starts to show that Apple is going to come down into this area, consolidate, and then start to move higher. This also shows as we move higher, we get up here, that Apple starts to move downward fairly quickly. And move downward fairly quickly, staying in this channel and then trying to move higher. So given this rotation, as we moved higher here, the predictions started saying, hey, we're going to see some real big downward trending here. But once we get down into this 165 to 175 area, we're going to find some support. We don't see a lot of clustering down in this area. Now, as you can see, we're starting to move up with these outlier trends way up here. Okay. Interesting, right? Now we see Apple might move up into the 210 area, maybe by November, December of this year. So let's go ahead and start preparing and looking at more recent data. So here's the analysis that took place originally. Now we're going to start looking at some of this downward data. We'll start with this bar, this bar, this bar, this bar, this bar. And what I'm doing is I'm moving forward in time to see where we're at. So now we have a totally different picture. We do have, we do still have upward activity. We do get quite a bit of clustering up in this area. We do not have this outlier price activity up here. So I'm going to do this in yellow or slight yellow color because this is an outlier. This is our upward channel, theoretically, which I will do in green. And this is our downward channel in red. Wrong one. This is our red channel. And now, when we look at this data, when we look at this consolidation, we have a little bit of an outlier here, a little bit of an outlier here. And the way I interpret this is I would come in and say, okay, well, it's aligning and clustering very well here. We have a very narrow range with maybe some upward activity trending kind of down in this area. And that gives me my general channel. And this would be an outlier event over here. And this would potentially be an outlier event over here. So you have the ability to see outlier events, primary channels, and consolidation channels very clearly here. And I'm going to, so I have this. Set this up as a blue outlier. And remember, folks, that we are, if we look at Apple now, clearing everything out, you have an outlier event potentially moving up here. You have an outlier event potentially moving up here. you have an outlier event potentially moving down from this level, and you have your primary channels going forward for Apple very flat. Basically, you have between a 164 range to a 185 range on outlier, which is about 15 or 20% chance of actually happening, and you have a very flat move into possibly this 186, 185 upper area between the green and the red here. Then you have a very solid consolidation that's going to take place and have Apple move back into this trend here. Very cleanly, Apple may move up here like this, and then once it reaches this 185, 187 area, kind of this previous high right here, it's very likely going to reach resistance into end of November, December, looking at Q4 earnings, and consolidate back down into this area. So understand that we are really looking at historical data that maps out predictive price activity in a way that gives us some clean operational guidance. Let's look maybe at Nvidia. Then last, I'll maybe try to look at Bitcoin. So here's Nvidia, waiting for it to load. There we go. Okay, so now we'll slide this back, slide this back. Lots of rotation over here. Let's start to go back in this area and start taking a look. Flat, 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 flat. Okay, a little bit of a pop here. Flat, little bit of a pop. Flat. Downward. 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 Okay, so let's stop right where we're at. That's where these arrows are, and suggest that from this entire time frame, ignoring these deeper lows, looking for clustering, I can kind of expect that Nvidia would have done something like this with regards to clustering, and may end up moving down in this area, whereas high clustering puts us across here, consolidation, back up here, consolidation, back up here, and then eventually clusters up into this area right here. This is what we see as guidance from the predictive modeling system going back to August 28th. Now let's reload and take a look. How did it do? You tell me. This is predictive modeling. We took a look at all of these weeks going forward to about here, October 8th. Sorry, right back over here. Right there. Oops, sorry, right here. And where we're at with this is that this is what it said was going to happen. It was going to move up, it was going to move down, it was going to move sideways, and then it was going to move into a broader range. So let's now take a look from here and go forward. We go here, 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 here. Every week gives us new data. So there we go. Now let's take a look at where we're at with the clusters. Widen this out a little bit. Let's take a look at where we're at with the clusters. Now remember, we stopped back over here. Now we want to find the clusters. Now where do you see clusters? I see clusters coming all the way out into this area, clustering here, then moving up to here, and I see upper clusters, if I follow them, clustering here, then literally clustering up in this area, and then potentially moving higher. So the way I would imagine Nvidia, based on this data, is kind of like this, and then maybe up into this area. From a midpoint standpoint, I see Nvidia staying kind of in this area, moving up into this area, and then consolidating out like this. So this gives us an idea of what the predictive modeling is capable of telling us. is we have the longer term picture staying in this range, the shorter term picture staying in this range. Ideally, we have a bit of a contraction area kind of in this area where we could see some moderate contraction, and I will change that to red. So that would be a concerning area for me, and that happens to be very close to January. Yep, it's December and January, and we really don't see any new highs. So when we look at this, we're not seeing any new highs in Nvidia. That tells us that we have a range from about 400 up to about 500, 480, 490, and we're going to stay within this range going forward. Okay, that's really kind of the normal area that price is going to stay. We do have this one chance of a potential deep V outlier, but again, Nvidia is probably going to stay in this 460 to 480 range most of the end of the year. Oops, don't want that. Let's lastly look at the QQQ. Waiting for it to load. Yes, crunching a lot of data, folks. Remember, this maps out a ton of data. Okay, so let's start back over here, up near this top, figure out where we're at. Now, the data itself actually tells us the accuracy of the data of the predictive system. So here we go. Let's stop right here. That is September 11th. So let's go ahead and take a look. And we have very clear clustering. I can see it obviously. We have broad clustering across here, across here, across here, and then lower clustering becomes less clear in this area with a potential back up into this area. I would say this is where these become less likely and this becomes more likely. Upper clustering was kind of consolidated. We had these outliers here. If you actually follow it, the data came down here, rallied back up, came down here, rallied over here, came down here. Then we get a big move up into this area, consolidating, consolidating, consolidating. Then it gets weaker and we start moving into this middle area. Why am I calling it this middle area? Because you see these clustered here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm counting those as heavier than these odd ones here. Once we get from the 3s to the 2s to the 1s, and these are outliers way out here, then I'm looking at consolidating back down into this trend. Okay, so now we've gone to this level. This gives us a pretty good understanding of where we're at. Let's go ahead and move to this level here, see what's coming in the near future. That's this bar. Okay, now we take a look at what's actually coming and being predicted over the last 7-8 weeks. Okay, very clear, extremely clear, in fact. We have upper channels moving into this area, fairly clean, not getting too far away. We have lower channels clustering down in this area, moving a bit sideways here, maybe a bit up, and then clustering downward. So this is the area that we have going forward for the NASDAQ. We have historical data saying that we may get up into these high areas, and we have more relevant, closer data saying that we're going to stay in the 360 to 375 range on the upper channel into the end of the year, and that we have some pretty deep correlations. Now, when we take a look at this, and we look at the upper correlation to lower correlation, the lower correlation looks much more aligned than the upper correlation. Therefore, I would suggest that we are going to be staying within this channel here, potentially moving higher here, and then we have a big chance of a breakdown back over into here. This tells us that the NASDAQ really doesn't have much chance of getting up near this level. I'd call it maybe a 15, 20, 25% chance of really getting up into this level, but it is mapped. It is there. There is a potential of it being there. Because this does not correlate with this, I'm not expecting this to become this outlier to become a very solid player, but it could happen. More than likely, the Nasdaq's going to stay in this channel, move downward, retest, maybe find some support here near the end of the year. This is literally the end of the year, December 18th, 25th, and then we go into January 1st. But then in early January, it looks like the Nasdaq's going to move downward again and try to retest some of these lows around 340. Okay, so remember, I started off with the SPY. And what I want to tell you again with the SPY is that we are looking at moderately strong downward trending potential with the outlier. That's this blue level here. We are looking at moderately strong downward trending that could take place over the next 3 or 4, maybe 5 weeks. That's this outlier area here. Otherwise, we are very much likely to stay within this range, within this 440 to 450 range over the next 2.5 to 3.5 months into January 2023. So understand that we are looking at an end of year formation that really, as I showed you, sets up kind of a near perfect, if I can say it, a near perfect Elliott wave structure. I mean, it may not get up to this area and may get just right up into this area here, 452, but this would be really a 62 to 75% correction of this trend. It would rotate, forming essentially a weaker double topping formation into another downward trend, potentially into March, April, May of 2024. And this could be, as I mentioned to you, this could be a very clear upward move followed by a downward corrective wave, kind of like this, followed potentially by another upward move. And that is very logical going into my longer term cycle pattern. So now let me clear this, clear this, clear this. And I'm going to do something because remember, I've been telling you that I don't expect much to happen in 2024, and I expect a bigger move to happen in 2025. So we're going to come over here, see where we're at, 2025. So we're going to get into January 2025, roughly right there. And we are going to move 2026 right there. 2024 moves into right there. Okay, so here is what could very cleanly happen from this low. We have the peak here, wave 4 peak, wave 3 peak, down into a wave 4 correction. This becomes our lateral move up, which I believe is a wave 5, wave 1 of wave 5. If we collapse and move down, roll back up, and then roll back down deeper, okay, this could now be the beginning of a deeper wave 4 correction. In other words, this wave 4 could extend downward quite a bit, and we have to be aware of that. Whoops. We have to be aware that this wave 4 failing to reach a new peak high at this level could extend wave 4 downward. If this bases and bottoms and starts to move higher into this area, we could see wave 5 do this, and this would essentially be an ABC move up, an ABC move down, and an ABC move up into 2025. And 2025, which is right here, is where I expect the next big phase to hit, going all the way up into the peaking area, which will be 2028. After 2028, which is right here, I believe we're going to run into some real danger right over in this area. So we're going to have some very clear crisis events coming in my opinion, in 2028 and after. Prior to that, I believe we're going to see a very solid wave formation that could be similar to what I've drawn here, moving down and moving up again before we see some sort of collapse event back over here. And there you go. This is for members. This is for everyone. I want you to be aware of what's happening and the tools that I use. Come visit me at MENT.com, MENT.com. Learn what I do, learn how I can help you, and be aware that we are very likely going to slide into the end of the year in a sideways price trend. Okay, that's it, guys. Bye.